Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everyone to the January 19th meeting of the Milford Planning and Zoning Board. If we could do the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag
of
the United States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under God, indivisible,
liberty and
with
justice.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Again, welcome. Meg, if you would please call the roll.
Sure. Miss Austin,
Present.
Mr. Castagnoli,
Present.
Mr. Cater,
Present.
Mr. Collegian,
Present.
Miss Kearney,
Present.
Mr. Mortimer,
Present.
Mr. Moore, Mr. Sadi,
Present.
Mr. Saharidis,
Present.
and Chairman Quish.
I'm here.
Thank you.
So new business, vote by March 11th, 2021. If this is a CGS 8-24, this is for 1 Tudor Road, also known as 0 Old Point Road, request by the City of Milford pursuant to CGS Section 824 to approve the proposed purchase of the property located at map 15, block 107, parcel 85A from St. Raphael Parish Corporation. And just as a clarification to any anybody in the public that is listening in or watching in, this is a task that we are given as a board. If we were to deny it, it's going to go to the Board of Aldermen anyway. If we were to deny it, it would just need a supermajority in the Board of Aldermen. But I see Justin is here. Is he going to speak?
I guess we're going to find out. Are you seeing?
Good evening, everybody. I'm here if the board has any questions. This is an excellent opportunity for the city. This is about 9 acres of land. There are many different opportunities that the city has for this, but for the most part, our vision includes some recreation space. We are in talks with the Boys and Girls Club, as they were under contract for this property for about 2 years. The mayor has a meeting with leadership of the Boys and Girls Club scheduled for about 2 weeks from now. But again, we ask you to support this proposal, forward it on to the Board of Aldermen. And again, I'll be here if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
The question, Mr. Sadi, I do have some questions for Mr. Rosen.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Rosen.
Evening, Mr. Sadi.
We had the package and I went through it quick. Are there any deed restrictions if we approve this and send it on to the Board of Aldermen?
Not to my knowledge. I'm pulling it up on my files now. Just having a little trouble loading. But not to my knowledge. I can certainly get back to you after consulting with the city attorney if that is the case.
I did hear you talk about recreation, and it's good to hear that. Is there any provision in the contract, if you're aware, that a percentage of the property would be dedicated to public use, which would generally be recreation?
I believe it's our plan for most of it to be used for public use. Again, whether it's for something such as the Boys and Girls Club or for open space recreation through the Department of Recreation here in town.
Last question is, when I look at the deed, and I know you don't have to include that in the proposed contract, but was it, as you indicated, was it your intention or the city's intention, excuse me, to maintain the building as best as you could and then use it for, as you said, either the Boys and Girls Club, or the Boys Club, or a different group?
Yeah, I believe we're still, it's a very fluid plan at this point. I think it will depend on, the state of the property. I know our public works team has taken a cursory look at the property, and pending the result of this board and the Board of Aldermen, will take a deeper dive into the property.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Chairman Quish.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, I'd hear a motion.
Mr. Sadi here. I move to approve as presented the petition of the city of Milford pursuant to CGS Section 824 to approve the proposed purchase of the property located at 1 Tudor Road, also known as 0 Old Point Road, map 15, block 107, parcel 85A from the St. Raphael's Parish Corporation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? David, I have a question for you. This is, what is this property zoned as?
CDD 2.
And what would that permit in terms of use? Is it open space recreation okay there, or what?
Well, you have that's an interesting, first of all, if the city buys it, the city is exempt from zoning. So that's the first thing. So if the city were then to turn around and resell it to someone for another use, those uses are spelled out, and the CDD2 allows a wide range of activities from, housing and business. There's a whole sort of laundry list of things that are allowed in that zone.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board? We have a motion, we have a second. Meg, would you please call the vote?
Ms. Austin,
With the motion.
Mr. Castagnoli,
Yes.
Mr. Cater,
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian,
I'm with the motion.
Ms. Kearney,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
With the motion.
Mr. Sadi,
With the motion.
Mr. Zaharidis,
With the motion.
and Mr. Quish.
I'm with the motion.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you, Justin.
You have a great night, everybody.
Next order of business is 67 Prospect Street, Zone MCDD, petition of Patrick Rose Tissot and Company for a coastal area site plan review for a proposed mixed-use commercial building on map 54, block 817, parcel 6, of which 67 Prospect Street LLC is the owner. Before we pass it off to the applicant, this is a coveted property in downtown Milford and has similar scope and impact as a Smith Funeral Home property that we had in front of us a few months ago. I would like to do this. I would like to have a discussion about whether or not we want to have a public hearing pursuant to the city attorney's opinion that we may choose to have a public hearing if we vote on it. If there is a motion and it is carried that we'll have a public hearing, then I think we should offer the opportunity, the choice to the applicant to have the presentation put off till the public hearing, or because they're here and prepared to present it now and then come back at the public hearing. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to open up a discussion. If anyone has any interest in commenting on whether or not we should have a public hearing on this application.
Mr. Sadi here again. Each one is unique. I suggest that this is one, as you mentioned, similar to the property on Broad Street. I would be in favor of having a motion, in favor of having a public hearing, and at appropriate time, if I have the floor, I would make the motion to open up for a public hearing.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you give a motion, and then if someone seconds it, then we can have further discussion and a vote.
Second.
I
Second.
make a motion for the record to have a public hearing on 67 Prospect Street, the coastal area site plan review that is before us tonight.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Joseph.
we had a public hearing on the funeral home property, so I think we should have a public hearing on this one also.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else would like to speak at this point?
This is Jim Cater. I agree. I think it's a good idea. I'm hearing a lot of people upset about this, talking about it over social media. I do think they need to at least have a say in this and understand possibly better what the plans are. You know, anything we could do to be transparent, I think it could, one way or the other, help in any project like this, in my opinion.
Okay, great. Anybody else want to speak before the? So we have a
Yeah,
motion
I
second.
would like,
Go
I would
ahead,
like to say something. Yeah, I definitely agree with the sentiment expressed already. But going over the literature, it seems the property is condemned, or it has to come down. Do I understand that correctly? Or is it just in need of repair and, you know, could be?
Yeah. I think the building on the street, the old building is not going to be demolished. It looks like it's going to have renovation, probably substantial renovation. It is pretty old, and so I don't really know the condition of the building, but it will not be knocked down in the plan as presented.
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Without further question or comment, we can have a vote on the public hearing. And I guess Mr. Sadi and I guess Peg seconded, we should put a date on that. So that would be our next meeting. Is that?
So, Mr. Twish, if the question is for me, asking me to amend the motion for public hearing, I hereby amend the motion that I made previously for public hearing at the next validly scheduled meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board.
All right, thank you, Peg. Is that okay with your second?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Without further question or comment, Meg, would you call the vote?
Ms. Austin,
With the motion.
Mr. Castagnoli,
Yes,
Mr. Cater,
With the motion,
Mr. Collegian,
I'm with the motion.
Ms. Kearney,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
With the motion.
Mr. Sadi,
With the motion,
Mr. Zaharidis.
Mark, you're muted.
You can do
sorry,
one of
guys, I'm with
these.
the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Chairman Quish,
I am with the motion.
thank you.
Before I ask the question of the applicant, David, is it appropriate that we allow him to do a presentation now, or should we have everything go off to the next meeting? I mean, he is scheduled, he's on the agenda.
We can ask him what he's comfortable with. My opinion would be, and he doesn't have to agree, but making a presentation tonight would mean he's making a presentation tonight for a site plan. With the public hearing, people are going to want to have obviously speak, and then he's going to need to address those questions, and he would probably have to refresh people's memories, even though it's only a few weeks away, and probably have to repeat some of his presentation. So, I mean, if I were in my opinion, if I were the applicant, I would do it all at once at the public hearing. But
No,
obviously,
I think that's true, but because they showed up and
Sure.
they're on the agenda, I'd like to give them the
absolutely,
choice.
absolutely.
So is there someone here representing the applicant?
I am. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Thomas Lynch with the law firm Lynch, Tremicki and Boynton. My office is located here in Milford at 63 Cherry Street. And I do represent the principals of 67 Prospect Street LLC. And with the board's choosing to have a public hearing on this matter, we will wait until the February 2nd meeting to make our presentation. I will add that I was also involved, as you all know, with the application on Broad Street representing MetroStar. I made comments the night that the board voted to have a public hearing on that application. So I won't reiterate them. I will just stress the fact that this application is being presented to you as a site plan, which means under our zoning regulations that it is zoning compliant. We will go through all the elements of the site plan, of course, at the next meeting, but I just wanted to stress that to you. I know also in response to Jim Cater's comment about information through social media, there was a lot of misinformation through social media, including the screaming headline on the Milford Mirror website last week saying historic house to be demolished, when in fact this historic house is going to be saved. So I also thank Tom Eversold for putting a corrective article out on the Milford Mirror to quickly correct that. But yeah, there is a lot of misinformation, and we look forward to presenting this to you as part of a settlement that was reached with the city of Milford to save the Baldwin House, which I believe will serve to satisfy a lot of people who have made comments in the past, especially when this application similar to this was presented to the Milford Historic Preservation Commission. So with that said, we look forward to seeing you and presenting these plans to you on February 2nd. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so this will be on the agenda as a public hearing for the February 2nd P&Z meeting. Next order of business is 22 Blair Street, Zone R5, petition of Ron Wasserman for coastal area site plan review for a proposed single-family dwelling on map 27, block 453, parcel 11A, of which Brian Wilson is the owner. The applicant has the mic.
Evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Ronald Wasmer, professional engineer, land surveyor with an office at 158 Research Drive, Milford, Connecticut. I'm here representing SMW Associates, of which Brian Wilson is the member. This is a coastal site plan application. The property is located at 22 Blair Street. David has placed the site plan on your screens. The property is presently a vacant lot, and we're proposing to build a single-family house. There was a house and a garage on the property that was demolished a few years ago. The parcel does lie within the flood zone, and the new construction will conform to all the Milford and FEMA flood zone requirements. We did have the property evaluated by a professional soil scientist, and there's no wetlands located on the property, and there's a report of such in your information. There are tidal wetlands located within 100 feet of the property, and that is why we're here with this application for a single family house in your coastal area review this evening. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. David, if you would provide us with an overview.
Okay. The applicant is proposing a new single-family dwelling at 33 feet, 1.5 inches in height. The proposed dwelling received a variance for setbacks on 10/23/2014 and is zoning compliant. The proposed development does not appear to pose any adverse environmental impacts on coastal area resources. The city engineer's comments B through G can be made a condition of approval.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
I have some questions for Mr. Wasmer. Through you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mr. Wasmer. How are you today?
I'm fine.
We don't recognize you with the beard. I appreciate the look, though.
Thank you very much.
We're given we don't get the paper maps all the time, but I was just trying to understand. It's in a flood zone, and is the first floor level, either Mr. Wasserman can answer it, or Mr. Sulkus, first floor level appropriate under our zoning requirements? And it
Yeah.
looks like the door is partway through that's why I was trying to figure out how high it is.
So it's typical of these houses along the East Broadway neighborhood. It's an elevated house. There'll be parking below the house. There's an entranceway with a stair that leads to the main living floor, which is above the flood zone.
But the height from the ground to the first floor is how many feet, Mr. Wasserman?
The garage floor is approximately 4.5 feet. The first floor, I think, is 15 feet above sea level, and the flood zone is 13.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you very much. A great presentation so far.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, I'd hear a motion.
I move to approve as presented the petition of Ron Wasmer for a coastal area site plan review for a proposed single-family dwelling on map 27, block 453, parcel 11A, of which Brian Wilson is the owner.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I think we need
Mr.
the
Quish?
conditions.
Yeah.
Yes, Peg.
Thanks
I think
first.
we need the conditions that David noted in the motion.
Yeah, to comply with the engineer's recommendations, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that comments B through G.
So John, is that okay to add that to your motion?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. And to the 3 seconds, is that okay? I guess so.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Meg, would you call the vote, please? You're muted.
Here we go. Ms. Austin,
With the motion.
Mr. Castagnoli,
Yes.
Mr. Cater,
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian,
I'm with the motion.
Ms. Kearney,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer. His motion, I assume he's with it. Mr. Sadi,
With the motion.
Mr. Zaharidis,
With the motion.
and Chairman Quish.
I'm with the motion.
Thank you.
All right, good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
We have, next up, we have public hearing, proposed regulation change to number 20-9, petitioned by Kevin Cresadian Esquire for changes to Article 3 District Use Regulations, Section 3163, Planned Elderly Community, to reduce the minimum lot requirement from 10 acres to 5 acres, to allow separate fee simple ownership in previously approved phased development planned elderly community use. The applicant has the mic.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for the record, Kevin Cresadian, my office is at 3 Lafayette Street here in Milford. It is a simple request, and Mr. Sulkus is sharing a screen with it now. Thank you, Mr. Sulkus. The history of this planned elderly community reg, it's actually was originally first came into the zoning regulations in 2002. It was amended in 2004 to include not only the RA district, but a couple of other districts as you see them, R30, CDD2, and CDD4. The reason we're making this regulation change request is that we have a property located at 523 Wheelers Farms Road that is under this zone. The property was originally approved for a planned elderly community use in 1998, prior to there being a 10-acre minimum. I was in front of the board in 2005 for an amendment to that site plan and special permit approval. There had been some, that was also approved by the board. It was just slightly changing the type of planned elderly use from an assisted living to just a specifically 55 and over use. I was in front of the board at that point in time. After that, I believe that this project, there is it's Southwick. It was originally Southwick. So there's a Southwick phase 1 that's already constructed between the vacant lot, which is 523 Wheelers Farms Road, and the old Howard Johnson's site, kind of on the corner of Wheelers Farms Road and Wolf Harbor Road. So there's an existing, I believe 55 and over community of, I don't know if it's 25 or 30 units, whatever it is, on that side, that was part of the shared development or scheme of development when this was originally approved. In 1998, shortly after the approval, and the first phase was either under constructed or constructed, the original developer had some financial difficulties and never completed that, never completed the second phase. What's changed over the years and what's actually driving this regulation request is the fact that this is under, because of the wording of the regulation, where it has to be under one ownership or control. The existing approvals, although they don't have to do with zoning, but it resolves the zoning ownership issue, is we are under a master condo association, and then there's 2 separate sub condo associations underneath that. The issues that has arisen over the past few years is that national title companies, although the use is approved and it's it's shared drainage and a shared access way, and all of that site plan, those main site plan features would not change. The issues with the title companies is that they've made a shift in policy not to ensure an association of this type. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with a problem that we're trying to solve. And what you can do is you can have fee simple ownership, which means that you own it just as if you owned your own lot or your own house that was not in a condominium association. So in order to do that, we would have to come back to the board in the future. If you approve this tonight, we have to come back to the board in the future and ask for a subdivision of that parcel. Right now, it's about, I think the whole parcel is about 12 or 13 acres, and it would be, 6 or so acres on each, on the phase 1 that's already constructed roughly, or maybe 5 acres, and then the remaining acreage on my client's parcel. But we can't do that and be in compliance with the zoning regulations because it would be 2 separate ownerships, even though the original project wouldn't change or the original use wouldn't change that's been approved a couple of different times over the years by this board. So that's the reason for the way that this is worded. I did do research to see what other RA properties that are over 5 acres in Milford, if this would have any impact on them. I looked through those files last week and this week. I didn't see any previous approvals. The way we've worded this is to try to make it as specific as we can. I did not see any other application or previous approval that this would have any impact on. So that's where we're at. And we'd like to, we'd really like to get the property marketable and usable, most likely for the same planned elderly community use that it has been approved for already, maybe with an updated site plan or what have you. We've had interested parties over the past few years, but it comes back to this condo association issue. I've spoken with the attorney for the existing phase 1, Robert Pacelli, on numerous occasions, and we're working together on this. The association as an entity has no issue with this request. So that's why we're here tonight. I can share a picture of the property. We're not here for a subdivision or any site plan approval, but if it's helpful, I can share my screen and I can show you the properties.
Sure.
Excuse me just a minute. I share here. Thanks for your patience. Try to bring back now.
But
Yeah,
while
thank
he's
you.
doing that, are there any other properties that are less than 10 acres that would now be eligible for this use?
Are you asking me the question?
I am.
The key thing with this is it has to be approved. So there are no other schools or projects that were approved prior to October 1st, 2005 that this would affect.
Right. Okay, that's a different question, but I'll ask it again after Attorney Crusaden goes through his site plan.
So, Mr. Chairman, yeah, this is what's approved. Well, this is what's existing now. So if you look to the northerly side or the left-hand side of the screen, northerly side of the site, this is Wheeler's Farms Road. Up here on the corner is Wolf Harbor. This is the units that are already built and have been built for a number of years. This is the shared access driveway. The gray or the shaded areas are what's been approved as shared resources or access and drainage features and improvements, and they would remain that way. We can't change the drainage. We can't change the site plan. I mean, excuse me, we can't really change the access drive. We've met with the police department over the years, and they'd like us to keep that same access. So what's vacant is to the right or to the south of the right of the screen or south of the property in this area. And so the proposal, if this is approved, we would be able to, if this zone text change is approved, we'd be able to come back in a month or two with a subdivision application that would show this property, the existing structures as one fee simple, or they'd probably have their own condo associate, continue with the condo association. And the property of my client would be fee simple ownership. There would be cross easements for the access and for the drainage. And we would hope that would solve the problem so that this site could, get its full value back on the tax rolls and actually serve a useful purpose, which I think that the city and the board have looked upon as a favorable use, which is the either over 55 or planned elderly community use. So that's our proposal, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. So David, again, the question to you is not whether there's an existing application that would be similar, but that if in fact we have other parcels that are less than 10 acres that would now be eligible for elderly community development.
Whatever else is out there or anything that comes in, if it's going to be located in an RA or R30 district, it would be what the zoning currently is, which is 10 acres. And if they're looking to build something in the R18, CDD2 or CDD4, it would be 5 acres. So this change would not affect anyone.
So
it wouldn't affect someone coming in today to make an application.
Or after we pass it, you mean?
Or after you pass it, correct. Correct.
So why is this not spot zoning then? Just curious.
I can answer that.
Sure,
Mr.
thanks.
Yeah, so spot zoning, and it's a common thing, and I prepared for that question because we hear it when you do applications like this occasionally. So because the end use is not in violation of the comprehensive plan and development, the comprehensive plan and development is your zone map and your zoning regulations. And because this is a use that's allowed in the zone already or in some other zones, And we're just asking that there be a reg change that continues to allow the same use, just in a different form of ownership. So, yeah.
Really,
That's
it's just a change in the minimum lot size that's required. That's all this is.
Understood. And I understand the reason for it as well. All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Gator.
I heard you say most likely you would continue with similar to what's on the other half. I mean, what does that mean?
Well, the property's been approved on at least 2 occasions for this planned elderly community use, and with some slightly different site plans and some slightly different aspects. That's the fully intended use. And that's probably what I think would be the most marketable use if we can clear up this issue. However, whether this is approved tonight or not, whatever other uses are allowed in the zone, somebody could come in and apply for that use to be put on this zone. I mean, somebody could come in and put in, whatever else is allowed in the RA zone on that vacant piece. It doesn't have to be planned elderly community. But by making this reg change, this is only with respect to the planned elderly community. So it makes no other changes with what could be allowed or put on the site, but there's no intention to put anything on there. And obviously, if they're putting anything else on there, if there were some other market to put something else on there, it could have, been applied for and approved by now. I mean, it's been since 1998 or longer that this parcel's been vacant.
Okay, good. That was a very good answer. Thanks.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Peg.
The Southwick people, from my understanding over the years, weren't they promised like a recreation center and some things that never happened? Is that part of anything that's going to be happening?
Yes, Commissioner. The original plan had a robust community center. The second, and then that developer is no longer in existence. The revised plan also had a community center and I think like a walking trail or things like that around the outer perimeter. So that's the most recently approved plan, which was 2005. So to answer your question, it would really depend on who the buyer was and what their corporate model most likely is for whether it's over 55 and over, or whether it's assisted living, or there's been what we've seen interest in is kind of a phased. It's 55 and over is part of it. Then it's assisted living, and then it's a dementia unit or an Alzheimer's unit. It would really depend on what that business model is for that new developer to come in. So there's nothing that's currently planned, but that's what the existing approvals provide for. And I think to answer your question, there's been some litigation over the years from, the association in phase 1 that's delayed the project, that's, caused an issue earlier on when it was first approved, and then when it was approved as a revised application. That's all been decided by the courts or settled. But I don't know whether that was a lack of some type of community center was part of that, or what exactly the specific claims were. So it would really depend on who the new user is.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Quiz.
Go ahead, John.
I'm not sure who could answer this. Maybe Mr. Sulkus. Why is it 10 acres? It seems like
John, we lost your connectivity.
acre seems.
Lost you, John. Here you go. John, can you,
Your connection was weak and we didn't get to hear you.
I think we lost him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, hopefully he'll come back. This is a public hearing, so Johnny, you're muted now.
Yeah, I'm back now. My internet dropped. I don't know if my question got through or not.
It did
It
not.
didn't.
Okay, basically, why is the requirement 10 acres in the first place for this type of community?
that's what the Planning and Zoning Board decided when they created those uses in those zones.
And
Mr. Mortimer, this is Kevin Crusade, and I can just answer, I can't answer it, but I can explain that I researched that question. I went back and looked at the regulations from 98 forward. And I also went and looked at the minutes from the planning and zoning meetings from when the regs had changed. And oddly enough, it first appeared in 2002 in the RA zone with 10 acres only. And there was no previous year or two before that in the minutes that explained why that took place. Because I was curious myself, like what was driving the 10 acres, the reasoning behind it. I then went from when the reg changed again to 2004, and I researched those minutes for those 2 years. And again, I did not find any reference to the regulation change in the planning and zoning minutes. So, it's tough to say what the reasoning for that was.
okay, thank you. It just seems 5 acres might be sufficient if you just reduce the number of units. I don't know, but thank you for that answer.
Any other questions or comments?
I have some questions, Mr. Quish.
Yep.
Thank you. Good evening, Attorney Crusaden. Just trying to get the time frame. The map that you showed us appeared to be a site plan of some sort. What was the date of that one, if you know?
Yeah, that was May. Well, the date on the map is May 2020, but it shows the conditions of the site, I think as of May 20th or May 24th, 2020. But if you were to look at an earlier survey, from whenever the construction of phase 1 was complete, including the access drive and the drainage area, it hasn't changed since then.
Okay, so that's what was a little bit confusing to me. So a project was approved with the 10 acre and some portion of that has been completed. That's where that 14-foot planned driveway or existing driveway, that's where that came from, through the project has already been started?
Right. Yes, that's correct, Mr. Sadi. And to be further specific, so thank you for your question. The reason for the 14-foot setback from that driveway is because that structure, if you didn't have two separate property owners, you wouldn't have a setback from that driveway. But if you approve this tonight or next month, and we come back in for a subdivision, we've immediately created a problem for ourselves, because if we want to draw the property line on the access drive, we only have 14 feet from that access drive to an already existing structure. And I think the minimum setback is either 20 or 30 feet. So what we would be doing is we would be coming in and we would have to then we couldn't ask for a subdivision because we'd have to ask for a variance. We wouldn't be compliant. But it's all based on the fact that we have an existing development, and we want to divide the development into two separate ownerships, not two separate lots with two separate ownerships, to be more clear. Because right now it's all one lot under a master condo association.
So if it's going to be two separate lots, is that really not legislatively giving you a subdivision if we agree with the change in the regulations?
No, if you agree in the change in the regulations, we still have to come back in for a subdivision. We've crafted it so that we would be compliant with the subdivision regulations if you approve it tonight, but rather than go through the cost and the expense of subdivision application, if the board said, no, we hate this proposal, we're not going to grant it, then we've spent money that we didn't need to spend on it. So we still need to come back in for that extra step.
The last question I have for you, and again, it's not a legal debate, but it's not a definition, one portion of it for spot zoning that confers a special benefit on one individual property owner, not available to any other similarly situated property owners, whether they've built or not built. Isn't that another definition of spot zoning?
I've researched spot zoning yesterday and today just to refresh my memory. I mean, that may be another example from a court case. That's not sticking out in my mind right now, but I can tell you that, we wanted this to theoretically, so if we're, theoretically, any other property in an RA zone in the city of Milford that has a prior approval of a planned elderly community prior to October 1st, 2005 would fall under this regulation. So the regulation itself is not eliminating any other property from being able to come in under this zone text change. The fact whether a property exists with a previous approval, that's a different question. But I understand the point, and I think that the main point for the spot zoning is that we're not asking the board to do anything contradictory to the town's comprehensive plan, or really to what the existing approvals are, because of the fact that we're trying to make this planned elderly community phase 2, if you want to call it, work. But in order to do that, what we're hearing from buyers over the past 7 and their title companies is it needs to be fee simple.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney Crusade, and Mr. Chair. I have no further questions.
Okay, are there any other questions before we open up the public hearing? Seeing none, I would say the public hearing is open. If anyone would like to speak to it, please raise your hand electronically or wave in front of the screen, and David will acknowledge you. If you do want to speak, please state your name and address for the record. Is there anybody in the general public that would like to speak?
I am scanning and I don't see anybody raising their hand or waving. Going once, I see nobody. Going twice, I see nobody. There is nobody, Mr. Chair, who would like to speak.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the public hearing is closed unless anyone in the board would see any reason not to close the public hearing. Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And any other questions or comments from the board before we let the applicant have a closing statement?
I just had one question for clarification.
Yes, go ahead, please.
When the first phase was built, was the entire property, including the property that you're talking about, was all owned by one person or one entity?
Yes, that's correct. It was all under one condominium association.
Okay, and since then, what has transpired? It's been sold to another person, the other part?
There is, yeah, there was, there's 2 sub-associations under a master association. So since then, the first phase was built and assumed the management and control and ownership of itself as its own association. And the second phase was purchased, or the land for the rights to develop the second phase and the land were purchased. And they have not been able to either build it or have a user that's interested in it.
Because of? You said they haven't been able to build.
Well, Yes. Well, because they have not been able to find a user for that. Over the years, there's been ups and downs in the economy. As far as finding a new buyer for the property, there is, like I had mentioned, we get to a certain point, and then the issue of the association and the title comes up. So the feedback we've gotten is it needs to be fee simple, meaning that there's no association that the second phase would be beholden to or fall under. They need to control the property entirely by themselves and not be part of an association. But there was litigation that tied it up for, I think, 5 to 6 years. There was economic downturns. There's been a lot of reasons why it hasn't been developed, not just one single reason.
Okay.
Okay, so public hearing is still open. Kevin, would you like to say anything else?
No, Mr. Chairman, thanks. I hope I answered the questions, especially the last one, satisfactorily. Like I said, there's a lot of reasons, not just this one issue that it hasn't been developed, but over the past few years, this issue has become the primary issue because of a shift in how national title companies are, what they're willing to insure as far as title to these types of projects.
Okay, great. Public hearing is closed. Is there anybody have any reason why we should not vote on this tonight? Seeing none, I'd hear a motion.
I'll give a motion.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Jim Cater. I move to approve as presented the petition by Kevin Kersadian Esquire for changes to Article 3, District Use Regulations, Section 3.1.6.3, Planned Elderly Community. Is there more to that, or?
Are you continuing, Jim, or is that it?
Or well, are there? I do all three of those, or?
No. Just I didn't hear if you went through the requirement from 10 acres to 5, or I didn't know if you broke up or what.
Oh, okay. I'm just going by the motion that was presented to us to approve this. Yeah, that's all I'm seeing right there, Jim. Yeah, and the 10 acres to the 5.
Okay, so I guess the document that you have was the motions didn't have the same language as the proposed change in the agenda.
Yeah, no, I'm not seeing that here unless I'm reading.
Okay, so I'll just read it, the rest of it. Planned elderly community to reduce the minimum lot requirement from 10 acres to 5 acres to allow for a separate fee simple ownership in previously approved phase development planned elderly community use.
Yes, what Jimmy says.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not seeing that in my document, but yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm. My motion.
Okay. And do we have a motion? We have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Castagnoli, thank you. Any comments or questions on the motion? Discussion?
Yes, Mr. Quish. Just to clarify, the proposed change is for not only lowering to 5 acres, but it also be fee simple, and that it doesn't discuss the property line driveway, because I have a document that was dated November 9th that was indicated to be the one that we're hearing this tonight.
Yeah, so the site plan that you're referring to, Mr. Sadi, is a kind of a master plan. If ever this property is sold, they'll come back to us with a specific site plan application, which would show the details on that.
My question to you,
the
though,
zone change doesn't address. The zone change does not address setbacks.
okay, but the proposed amendment 20-9, which was dated November 9th of 2020, that was linked to our agenda, indicated that the language would be that for planned elderly community use approved in the RA district prior to October 1st, 2005. The minimum lot area required in RA district shall be 5 acres, and the required setback from a property line that borders an existing driveway serving the planned elderly community shall be 14 feet. That is what is provided in our agenda tonight, unless I have the wrong document. Mr. Sulkus can let us know if that is
Yes.
correct. That's why I
Looks
believe the
like we
motion
have
by Attorney
three,
Cater.
three different documents. One is the agenda. One is the motion that Jimmy read, and then the third one is a more specific language that Mr. Sadie's reading.
Okay, so Mr. Sadie is reading the actual language change that you will be voting on tonight.
Okay, so.
And I would point out that it doesn't talk anything at all about fee simple, which the chair was attempting to amend the motion.
Yeah, this is what I'm seeing on the agenda. So
there should be no language in there about anything fee simple.
Okay, that was in the proposed change in our agenda.
That shouldn't be, because the official memo.
What I printed out 10 minutes ago, so.
Okay, are you seeing, are you seeing the shared screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so number 3 is the proposed change. That's it. So this language here.
Yeah, this seems very specific for a zone change. Why is
for the regulation change? Yeah, it's
right, the regulation change.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us why it's that specific to have a setback in between?
I believe Mr. Crusaden explained it in that because there's an already existing building on the site, because the site, remember, has Southwick already there. So with that driveway, there's a structure or something that would keep them from subdividing it if this is approved.
Yeah, they would need a variance. Okay, with that clarified information, Mr. Cater, would you like to make a motion?
How do I word that? I mean, I make a motion as what we discussed.
You can read it off the shared screen, number 3 in bold.
Okay. Part of my motion amended for a planned elderly community use approved in the R-A district prior to October 1, 2005. The minimum lot area required in the R-A district shall be 5 acres, and the required setback from a property line that borders an existing driveway serving the planned elderly community shall be 14 feet. Is that good enough, Jim?
Yes, perfect. We have a motion and a second. Do we have a second? That is specific to this language.
Yeah, Mr. Castagnoli is waving his hand.
Okay. Yeah, this is a little disconcerting that we had 3 separate bits of information. And I personally, I did understand the answer that Attorney Crusaden gave, but this is so specific that I can see how it's important to the applicant, but I don't see how it's appropriate for the
regulation. Yeah.
Yeah, for the regulation. It just seems to me to be too property specific to be something that should typically be of a broader breadth. That's just my feeling.
I agree.
I would also.
Sadie here too. I think that I have 2 concerns. It clearly, although Attorney Crusade and I disagree, it's spot zoning, and we're legislating a subdivision that is not appropriate at this particular level. So I would not be in favor of said motion.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've conflicted because as presented, I see that we have a property that could be, have a beneficial use to the community. And if we can do something that allows for that development to be, the fulfillment of something that the board already approved and liked at one point. Now there's an ownership issue, there was a financing issue. In order to make this become a productive property again, they need some relief, and I get that. And if it wasn't for the fact that it just smacks too much of something that is totally specific to this, it sounds like spot zoning to me, and it just feels like that. So I'm uncomfortable with it.
Is there something I need to do, or?
No, I think at one point, if there's no more discussion, we can have a vote, and it's a 2/3 majority for a regulation change.
Well, there was no second, was there?
Mr.
Joseph,
Castagnoli.
did you second?
Yes, he did.
You're muted, yeah, okay. Without further discussion, Peggy?
Well, can I ask a question?
Yes.
If the new owner of the big piece of property were to build exactly this, another Southwick, just continue Southwick into that property, would there be an issue?
I don't think they own the whole thing. They only own what's built, not what's vacant.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
two separate owners, and so the new owner needs a new application.
Well-
And the new application is not, it was compliant because it was more than 10 acres. Now it's not compliant because it's two different owners. Is that accurate?
Well, that doesn't answer my question though.
Oh, I'm
If
sorry.
the new owner came and said, I want to develop this property, this 10-acre parcel or 5 acres or whatever it is, and I want it to be Southwick 2. There's already a Southwick 1. I want to build exactly the same thing on the other side.
It's not permitted because it's not 10 acres.
Okay, so but we're just changing it to 5 acres, right? If we were to adopt this and leave out the thing about the driveway.
Yeah.
If we just left out that whole sentence about the driveway, I would be in favor of that. But if the throwing in the driveway thing is what's throwing me off, as far as being very specific.
Right.
I'm
Can I
concerned,
amend it?
what would stop the new owners from putting in, say, luxury apartments instead of elderly?
Wouldn't be permitted because it's an RA, residential 1 acre zoning, that does allow for senior housing, or what's the language?
And 55 and over,
A planned elderly community.
I know the committee. Mhm.
We allow that in an RA with a minimum of 10 acres.
Well, that
Now
was,
we're asking to change it to be a minimum of 5 acres. And if we do that, it could affect other properties that are more than 5 acres in an RA zone. Now, when you start talking about specifics of a site plan in the zone reg, I'm just uncomfortable with that.
Mhm.
But I guess we could, I don't know. David, any consult there?
Well, again, this is very specific. So because it's so specific, it would only affect this property. It wouldn't affect other properties. If the board thinks that 10 acres is too much for Plan Elderly, and you want to make allow it on smaller parcels, that would be a different regulation change. But that's your call. I mean, you have what you have before you this evening.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Brian.
if I may, David, and to your point, it wouldn't preclude a future developer for coming in with an application and asking for a reduction to 5 acres.
Correct. Someone could come in, just like this applicant came in and said, hey, listen, I'd like a regulation change and be able to develop whatever they want to develop on, change the standards and build it on a smaller lot. That goes for any application.
My thought is, I'm not, without debating whether or not this is spot zoning, I'm not sure that, it doesn't frighten me. And it's almost as if this applicant's doing us a favor and limiting the issue to one issue. He has a very small issue to make it profitable or usable. And we've got a very small issue of helping him get to that. It this doesn't bother me.
Okay. I mean, I hear you. I think that, my instinct throughout the whole presentation was that, yeah, it's great. Let's let this vacant lot be fulfilled or be developed to the fulfillment of the original plan. So that was the outstanding thing. Then I kind of got dissonance with 3 different sets of language in front of us, which threw everything out of whack. And then it does, not the first time we've seen something that's, it says if you ask for it on a Thursday, you get, the answer is yes. So at one point it does seem so specific that it does smack of spot zoning, which I'm not even sure I fully understand all the arguments around spot zoning. If it's good for the city and somebody could call it spot zoning, it's still good for the city. So I'm conflicted, actually, personally.
Yeah, me too. This is Jim Cater again. Yeah, kind of. I'm going back and forth. Brian brought up a very good point. I mean, and you bring up a very good point. I actually was kind of flipping your way, but then what Brian said made me really think. It's like, we could be opening up a door if we just go and change the zoning. The way we have it now is the way we want it, and no one else is going to be able to sneak in, because this situation is not going to happen to anybody else, because there's no other properties like that. So really all he's trying to do is get away with the 14-foot variance. So if we took that out of it, he would come in later on with the project with the variance. I don't know if we could do that. But in a sense, it is sort of spot, I think, if I know what it means. But in this case, it's really not going to affect anybody else. He's actually, like Brian said, almost doing us a favor where we don't have to worry that somebody else is going to slip in. And to John's point, that was the question I had asked. Well, who's to say somebody else is going to move and do something else? Well, if they were going to come and do something else, they could do it now. Any other kind of project that it's legal to do would do it. No one wants to do it.
Yeah, the only thing they can do is residents with acre per lot.
Yeah, and if they want to do that, they can do it. So no one wants to do it. So it's kind of a tough thing. I mean, I did jump on a little bit too quick because you really made me concerned that I was like, wow, should I really did the motion? But Brian really brought up a good point. In a sense, they are kind of doing us a favor. We don't have to worry about, are we making a mistake? Is this going to open up a Pandora's box and this is going to affect everybody? Really, because it's so tight that I think the chances of this affect anybody else and have a negative impact is pretty minimal. And unless this is something we don't like this project, that's something story. But
yeah, I mean, to your point too, is it was a public hearing and no one came out screaming against it. And it's probably good for the neighborhood.
Yeah, another good point.
Yeah, I just wish there was not some distance between the 3 sets of language.
Well, to be honest, though, my language was the motion to accept as was presented, and what was presented was what I read.
Did you read that? Did you read that off a document that you got on the Dropbox?
Yeah, but it's part is I'm always sent the thing. I'm sending the agenda. The motions are set up on what to read on the motions.
Yeah.
The motion says what has been presented. What was presented was I read that there, but like as we all did. So when I'm accepting what they presented, I'm assuming that we're accepting that. We shouldn't have to read, 5 paragraphs.
Okay, no, that's fine. I get you. All right, anybody want to share their thoughts further? Okay, we have a corrected motion and we have a second. Meg, if you would please call the vote.
Sure. Ms. Austin,
With the motion?
Mr. Castagnoli,
Yes.
Mr. Cater,
With the motion?
Mr. Collegian,
I'm with the motion.
Ms. Kearney,
With the motion?
Mr. Mortimer,
I'm with the motion.
Mr. Sadi,
Against the motion?
That was against the motion. Mr. Zaharidis
With the motion.
and Chairman Quish.
I'm with the motion.
Thank you.
Joseph Castiglione, I couldn't hear his response. Joe, could you unmute and clarify?
I heard it with the
I voted
motion.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, you have 7 members are needed to affirm it, and you have 7 members who voted for it. So the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. All right, again, sorry for whatever. I mean, that's why we're here though, to discuss it. And if we have a change of mind, that's okay. We listen to each other and come out hopefully with the best result for the city.
No, that was good, Jim. What you brought up, it actually made me really go back and think. And I think exactly what you said, why we talked.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So then the next is a proposed regulation change 20-4 petition by Planning and Zoning Regulations Subcommittee for changes to Article 9 Zoning Board of Appeals, Section 923 prohibited variances to prohibit variances to the creation of new lots. David, if you would give us an overview, please.
Okay, so right now, there are 3 prohibited types of variances. That means that if someone has one of these types of variances, wants to pursue a variance for something that's prohibited, they can't. We would like to add a 4th one, which is no application shall be accepted to vary any minimum lot requirement for the purpose of dividing, subdividing, or creating a new lot. And the reason for this is only you, the Planning and Zoning Board, can create new lots. New lots shouldn't be created by variance by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And your power to create those lots is by state statute. It's your enabling legislation. So we want to avoid, because we have seen on occasion in the past, someone is in an R10 zone and they have 7,000 square feet instead of 10,000 square feet, and they go to ask for a variance so they can create 2 small lots. And that's not the purpose of our regulations or the intent of our regulations. This would prevent people from going to the ZBA for the purpose of creating new lots, which only you can do.
Okay. Are there any questions or discussion?
Yes, Mr. Quish, through you to Mr. Sulkus. What about areas of the city that were in existence prior to the zoning rules and regulations? Are they exempt? Are they grandfathered in? If you could just explain that, please.
Yeah, you have lots that are of record prior to the subdivision regulations, and those lots are what they are. If they're already in existence, and say the underlying zoning is 10,000 square feet, but it's a 5,000 square foot lot that existed prior to the subdivision regulations, that's perfectly fine. They can develop those lots. So you have.
And, I'm sorry. I didn't know you was done.
I'm done. I guess I'm done at the moment.
And the concern that I have, and we haven't really addressed this, but in the mid 80s to the early 90s, there was substantial flooding. And I believe that the time, certain of the records of the zoning department, the building department, they either were damaged or lost. Were you aware of that at all, either through you, Mr. Sulkus, or the older members of the board?
There were records that were stored in the basement of City Hall once upon a time that had gotten flooded, but that doesn't affect the subdivision parcels that are at the city clerk's office, because all of this has to be filed at the city clerk going back before we had regulations. And we didn't lose all of our regulations over the years, so we know every year what the subdivision regulations were and what the zoning regulations were since they've been created. So it's a fairly common occurrence where someone will come in and they'll ask for what's called a 642 under our regulations, which is to certify a pre-existing lot that doesn't conform to our standards today, but it doesn't have to because it was pre-existing prior to November of 1929.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. I would open up the public hearing and ask anybody who would like to speak to this matter to raise their hand electronically or wave, state your name and address for the record.
Okay, I am screening. I do not see anyone raising their hand.
Mr. Sulkus, it's Kevin Crusade. I'd like to comment.
Oh, he has a static picture, so I can't see him waving his hand. So, okay, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sulkus and Mr. Chairman. My address, 11 Bonsaline Street here in Milford, Connecticut. I'm speaking as a resident, not as an attorney objecting to or opposing or in support of the application. I understand to a certain extent what's trying to be accomplished, but I think that the board respectfully should ask themselves what problem is attempting to be solved by changing the regulation. And secondarily, I'm not sure if this has been, I'm assuming it's been sent through the city attorney's office for comment or review. I'm not sure if it hasn't. I would recommend that it goes through the city attorney's office. And the reason is that, and David's right, you don't want to have the ZBA grant variances so somebody can squeeze 2 lots out of 7,500 square feet when it's a R12-5 zone or something like that. But let me run a scenario by you that's a little bit different. Somebody loses property off the front of their lot because of a state taking. And then instead of 50 feet wide, they only have 47.5 or 48 feet or 49 feet. And the lot's never been, it's not on a record subdivision map. It's not, an old lot of record like Mr. Sadi was referring to, or with one of the houses destroyed, but it meets all of the other requirements, except now since the state took the property or something, then for example, as an example, they've lost a building lot, whereas they've owned it for years and assumed they could always go in for a re-subdivision or a subdivision or some type of creation of that lot. So that would be one scenario where it's not as black and white. There's a lot of lots, or I think that I talked briefly with Mr. Sulkus about this morning when I happened to be in Parsons, and I think that this comes up occasionally. I don't know that it's a frequent problem or that there's rampant abuse of it, but the other thing to be aware of is, and this is with all due respect to the powers and authorities of this board, is that statutorily, the Zoning Board of Appeals is in place to grant relief, as you know, and that's the only board that can grant relief, and it's there to allow or provide for some elasticity to the regulations. And the Planning and Zoning Board cannot usurp the authority of the Zoning Board of Appeals by prohibiting the types of variances that they can approve, except for a use variance for a use that's not allowed in the city. That's my understanding of the distinguishment of the powers of the two different boards. So I would just respectfully caution, maybe there's another way to address this issue in the future. But I think that the board should really consider whether you're, taking the authority away from another board that has that right as of statute. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
So that's a question that I'd like to ask. Did we get an opinion from the city attorney?
It was sent to the city attorney. We did not, I believe, hear from them. So they, usually if they have an issue, they let us know. But to address an issue Mr. Crusaden brought up, the Planning and Zoning Board, have the ability in a subdivision application in your subdivision regulations to grant waivers to the standards. It's a high bar because the
special exception.
It's not a special exception. It's in the subdivision regulations yourself, themselves. We're talking about the subdivision regulations. So
Gotcha, okay.
yeah, so again, only you by statute have the ability to create new lots. And if someone, in using Mr. Crusaden's example, thought that they had enough land and all of a sudden some of it's gone, well, I suppose they could come to you with a re-subdivision plan and you can make that determination.
So there is elasticity, to use Attorney Crusadian's language.
In your subdivision regulations.
Okay. Very good. Is there anyone else in the public who would like to be heard? Seeing none. And again, thank you, Kevin, for your perspective. I appreciate that. Seeing none, is there anybody that sees why we should not close this public hearing? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. If there's no further question or comment, I'd hear a motion.
I have some questions for Mr. Sulkus, please. Mr. Sulkus, I understand you talked about subdivision. Could you address the question that Attorney Crusaden said? Person has a completely legal building lot. They're not asking to subdivide it, but because we're having projects in some parts of the city where the state is taking over the property, they therefore not be zoning compliant. They have not built anything on it before, so I would suggest it's not a subdivision. How would you address that answer? They're not asking to subdivide. They just want to build on a lot that they believed was zoning compliant that would not longer be zoning compliant because they lost 50 feet.
That's not what we're talking about here. So I totally agree with you that if they had a lot that was in existence and they're not asking to subdivide it, we're only talking about creating new lots. If the lot is already there and there was a taking or some issue that made the lot smaller and they had setback issues, then by all means, they can go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. We're only talking about creation of new lots.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I would hear a motion.
I move to approve as presented the petition by the Planning and Zoning Regulations Subcommittee for changes to Article 9, Zoning Board of Appeals, Section 9.2.3, prohibited variances.
Okay. Joseph, second. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, Meg, would you please call the vote?
Ms. Austin,
With the motion.
Mr. Castagnoli,
Yes.
Mr. Cater,
With the motion,
Mr. Collegian,
With the motion.
Ms. Kearney,
With the motion,
Mr. Mortimer,
With the motion,
Mr. Sadi,
Sadi will abstain from the vote, please.
Mr. Zaharidis,
With the motion.
Chairman Quish.
I'm with the motion.
Thank you.
I see a lot of people that seem to be joining us on this electronic meeting. I want to make sure that people are not here for 67 Prospect Street that we have addressed, and there will be a public hearing on February 2nd. So I appreciate, you're welcome to stay and listen and be part of the meeting, but if in fact you are waiting for that application, it has been postponed and there will be a public hearing on February 2nd. Our next order of business is proposed regulation change 20-1, petition by Planning and Zoning Regulations Subcommittee for changes to Article 3, District Use Regulations, Section 317, CDD 2, Section 317-2, Special Uses, 319 CDD 4, 319-2 Special Uses to reference planned elderly community use in the CDD 2, CDD 4 regulations sections. The use is to allow the use is allowed in CDD2 and CDD4 zones, but it's only referenced in the one-family residential district under 3.1.6. So David, if you would give us the overview on this, please.
Sure. So right now, if you're a person interested in developing planned elderly communities, it's only listed in, the reference to it is currently only in section 3161. And it calls out being allowed in the CDD2 and CDD4, but it's not listed in the CDD2 and CDD4. It's only listed in the RA regulations. So we're just putting a reference into those sections saying, hey, this is a use that you can have. So it makes it easier for someone navigating our regulations. And it also clarifies that the application is a special permit, because right now the regulations just refer to making an application. So it makes it a special permit, and it's putting references into the sections where it's currently allowed, just to make it easier for people navigating our regulations.
And just to clarify for everyone, special permit does require a public hearing.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, so this is something that we did discuss in the regulations subcommittee and thought it was important. So this has been circulated, David?
Yes, it has.
So this also has been circulated to the regional land use commission, as well as whatever stakeholders are required.
Yes.
It has not been objected to.
Correct.
So what we'd like to do is like to hear a motion.
Well, it's a public
no, public hearing, I'm sorry. I stand corrected. This is a public hearing. So first I'll ask if there's any questions or comments from the board. Seeing none, I'd like to open the public hearing and invite anybody to be heard. I'd just like to say, if you do, raise your hand electronically or wave and state your name and address for the board.
Okay, so I'm scanning and I see nobody raising an electronic hand or waving. So there's going once, going twice. There's no one interested in speaking.
That's your auctioneer background, huh?
Thanks.
Okay. So seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, I'd hear a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented, proposed regulation change 20-1 dated January 9th of 2020, updated 5/19/20, changing section 3.6.1 and adding sections 3.7.2.21 and new section 3.19.2.20 as contained in the appropriate language of said proposed regulation change.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Joseph, thank you. Any further comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, just a reminder, and shame on me because I forgot to put it in the motions. We need to have effective dates for all of these changes.
Okay, so we'll have a motion after these are approved for an effective date on all of them.
Correct.
Okay, so this we can close the public hearing. We have closed the public hearing. Without further comment, Meg, please call the vote.
Ms. Austin,
With the motion.
Mr. Castagnoli,
Wait, yes.
Mr. Cater,
With the motion,
Mr. Colichin,
I'm with the motion.
Ms. Kearney,
With the motion,
Mr. Mortimer,
With the motion,
Mr. Sadi,
With the motion,
Mr. Zaharidis,
With the motion.
and Chairman Quish.
I'm with the motion.
Thank you.
I make a motion. What's the effective date? that we'd like to put down for these 3 regulation changes?
February 5th.
I'll make a motion to add to each of these, to make the effective date February 5th on these 3 regulation changes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any question? That's Peg. Any questions, comments? All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Do you have any old business? Any liaison reports? Subcommittee reports, we have the POCD is now meeting twice a month, trying to catch up. We kind of lost some ground with, I think being virtual kind of prohibits it being as proactive as we wanted to be, so we want to catch up a little. The minutes of those, of both the POCD and the regulation subcommittee are on the website for your review, and you're welcome to come in and join either committee and also participate in the meetings as long as we make sure we don't have a quorum. When is, Meg, do you recall when the next regulation subcommittee meeting is? Tomorrow. Is it?
Is it tomorrow?
Is it? I didn't send anything out if that's the case.
I thought that the POCD was meeting next Tuesday.
Next week, yeah.
But as far as the regs, usually it's appended to the 3rd Tuesday to the beginning of the meeting.
Right, so there's, it would be, should be the regulation subcommittee and POCD meeting the same night, once a month, and then once a month POCD meets alone.
An extra time. Yeah,
Okay.
that
Yeah,
4th Tuesday seems to be shaping up.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Approval of the minutes. Do you have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, without objection. Staff report.
None this evening.
All right, well, thank you everyone for your input and thoughts and your time and effort. Meeting's adjourned. Motion to adjourn.
Take care, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.
Night, folks.
Night.
Night, John boy.
Night.